The Mind series. Episode 2, Recontextualizing. Okay, welcome back for another episode of the Mind series. So let me very quickly review. We started off with the breath series, and the whole idea there was that by breathing, we can shift our body from our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. So just the act of breathing changes our neurology and how it's functioning. After we get into rest and digest, the bottom line is that if we've been stressed for some time, our bodies it will continue to carry the tension. And so then we talked about in the body series, how do we stretch the stress out of our bodies? How do we release the energy out of our bodies? So starting with breathing, we go from fight or flight to rest and digest. Then we stretch the stress out of our body. We release the tension out of our body. Then we can start looking at our mind and ask ourselves, how can we change our thinking in such a way that keeps us from getting aroused to begin with? Are there any cognitive strategies that we can use? So last week we talked about reframing as a cognitive strategy, and this week we are talking about recontextualizing. And I think you could argue that recontextualizing is just a different expression of reframing, but I think of it as a very specific kind of reframing. So what is recontextualizing? Basically, it's this: taking something from its usual context and resituating it in an unfamiliar context, perhaps thereby changing its meaning. Okay, so taking something from its usual context, resituating it in an unfamiliar context, and thereby changing its meaning. So I'm going to give you two examples of what that can look like. First example, a while back I was stressed out because I had to go do a workshop in Dallas, and I'd never worked for this company before, and I was stressed about it, overwhelmed. I wasn't sure I could deal effectively with this threatening situation called presenting to these corporate leaders on emotional intelligence. And before I was leaving, I had to leave my house and make a 3-hour drive up to Dallas. I couldn't find my keys, and so I usually keep my keys in a certain spot, and couldn't find them. Look, and then it was in the morning, and I was getting panicked, and so I asked my wife, have you seen my keys anywhere? And she said, "Oh, I'll help you look." So she starts looking, and I'm getting really frustrated. Like, I know I left them here. Where are they? And so then a couple minutes later, she comes back and she jingles them and has this real sheepish look on her face, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was cleaning yesterday, and I moved them over here to this other spot." And I was livid, like, how dare you touch my stuff? And so I got my keys and I said, "I gotta go." And I took off, and I'm flying up the road, up the highway, just angry and upset. Camera problems here. Let me switch over here. Flying through the road, angry, upset. How dare you take my keys? What are you doing? And really spent like an hour just stewing and brewing and being so angry at her. How dare she? And making up all these narratives about how she was trying to sabotage me. And, I was maybe 5 or 6, 7, 10 minutes late at the most, getting out the door, later than I would have been. But I got so freaked out about it, So this idea of recontextualizing, taking something from its usual context and resituating it in an unfamiliar context. Well, the context of her misplacing my keys or resituating my keys was basically, they're here, let's put them over here. And in that moment, it made me so angry. But I started thinking, think of it in a different context, Adam. A week from now, are you even going to remember that she misplaced your keys? A month from now, a year from now, will your life be any different because you had this one little bump in the road? And the answer is no. Wouldn't if I didn't tell the story all the time. I'd never even remember that. But the point is that there are so many things that we get so worked up about in the moment, but when we think in the big picture, we realize it's really not that big of a deal. So that key, the example of my keys being misplaced is one. Here's another one. When my son was first learning to drive, he had a little fender bender, and it happens, no big deal. And I didn't freak out, but I was stressed because I'm thinking, I don't know how much the deductible is going to be, and we're going to have to get this fixed, and on and on. I was angry about it and stressed. And I think I don't even remember what the deductible was now that I think about it. I don't know, maybe $500 or $200, whatever it was. But in that moment, it was like $200. I don't want to spend this, you know, it's the last thing I want to spend money on. So the grand scheme of things, here we are all these years later. And I look back and I think, man, you know, we could have been retired by now, but yeah, my son wrecked his car and it cost us that deductible. So now we have to work for another 50 years, you know, just to try to, well, of course not, you know. So again, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that big a deal, but I was freaking out about it. So back to this definition of recontextualizing, I just want to invite you to think about the things in your life right now that you're stressed out about, and ask yourself in a different context, how big a deal is this really? Tomorrow, this thing that I'm freaked out about, how big a deal will it be? Next week, next month, next year, 3 years from now, how big a deal would this be? Now, there are some things that will be a big deal for the rest of our lives. You know, the doctor calls and says, I've got bad news for you. That could be a potentially life-changing situation. You know, the death of a loved one. I mean, those are truly significant. But the question is, to what degree am I freaking out over things that really aren't that big a deal? And if I can just understand them in a different or broader context, that will help reduce my stress and give me some perspective. So again, that's one cognitive exercise that we can engage, this practicing recontextualizing that can help reduce our stress. So be thinking about that. Again, what are you getting stressed out about? And in a different context, can you think of it in a different context that will reduce your stress? Okay, so the first cognitive exercise was reframing, and the second one is recontextualizing. I hope you find it helpful, and we will see you next time. Thanks.